in. See any positives in this report?
Absolutely, I do. So in investing, we have this term called the trend is your friend. And in this case, it's absolutely true. Even when it comes to economic data like jobless claims, we've been down now, trending lower for the last 7 weeks. In fact, last week's number was revised downwards to 2.68 million from the 2.98 million. And I'm also looking at the states that have reopened. For instance, Georgia saw the biggest drop in the week, a decline of 66,000 from a week ago, which shows that once the economy reopens, people get back to work. These jobless claims numbers do eventually keep going down. We saw the biggest increase when it comes to California, a jump of 33,000, but that comes more from the gig economy, which is paying some pretty good unemployment benefits. So some people suspect that people prefer to get these jobless benefits instead of going back to work. But I would say the continuing jobless claims, that would be probably the most concerning factor here, is that it rose to a record of 25 million.
All right, we hear you, Susan. Thank you very much.
And the general counsel of Twitter. So for a few weeks, President Trump has pointed at conspiracy theories that possibly Joe Scarborough, who is her husband and her co-host on Morning Joe, may have been involved in a possible death of his congressional aide back in 2001. Mika says that this is ridiculous. Take a look at what she said and take a listen to what she said on the show.
Donald, you're a sick person. You're a sick person. To put this family through this, to put her husband through this, to do this just because you're mad at Joe because Joe got you again today, because he speaks the truth. Twitter, you shouldn't be allowing this, and you should be taking these tweets down, and you should be ashamed of yourself. You'll be hearing from me on this, because this is BS.
Now, other Democrats like Kamala Harris has also told Twitter to take down and ban President Trump from the social media site. But social media says, look, President Trump is a public figure, obviously, and he has influence in what he says, and people want to hear it. So they've said that they will keep him on the platform.
And he also happens to be the president of the United States, and it wouldn't be a good idea to ban him from a public forum. But there you go.
Don't you find it strange that it's Mika trying to defend her husband? Why didn't Joe just speak up for himself?
I cannot explain those two, ever.
Okay.
I won't try. Thank you, Susan.
July, but obviously this year is a little bit different with COVID-19. And according to the Wall Street Journal, Jeff Bezos actually made that call to delay Prime Day this year, which is their 48-hour shopping extravaganza. So now it's returning in September instead. And Prime Day is when you get those $50 Fire Sticks and Fire TV and Echoes, Amazon.Echoes. And they also sell a lot during that period. $7 billion in sales last year, 175 million items, they say, which is up from 71% from the year before. So this is the, shall we say, premier shopping event for Amazon for their Prime customers who shell out $100 a year for their memberships.
And by the way, Susan, left-hand side of the screen for our radio listeners, $2,501 a share, $2,502 a share.
I think we should also point out, Stu, we hit a record high yesterday, and this is adding to it. So, I mean, Amazon, you just can't stop the stock. In a letter to employees, we heard from Starbucks' CEO Kevin Johnson saying that sales here in the U.S. are back up to what they were, 60 to 65% of their normal sales. And they've reopened close to 85% of the stores and the cafes across America. They were targeting around 90% in early June. So they are definitely on target to do even better than that. And as for China, it looks like sales are back up to 80% of what they were just about a year ago before coronavirus hit. Now, they lost around $900 million during the shutdowns. But given that you had shutdowns in their two biggest markets of the U.S. and China, I think these numbers are still pretty positive, and that's why the stock is up close to 1.5%, 1.25% today. And this is pretty much what you can anticipate when you have these economies and states starting to reopen and big business getting back to normal. So I think this is some pretty good news for Americans out there.
A problem here with an Apple phone and how to get into it if I'm using facial recognition. I know you're laughing, but let me explain the problem here. If I've got an iPhone, and I do, and if I got into it by, what is it, facial recognition or eyeballs or something like that, facial ID, how do I get into it if I've got a mask on?
Well, I'm glad to be your IT source. So I would like to see the mask one day, but if you are wearing a mask, there's a few updates in your new iPhone software. Now, one of them is, will it recognize you with your mask on? No, but it'll make it faster to get in with your passcodes, so you have to remember that, Stu, in the future. Also, another new update for the new iOS is Apple and Google's COVID contact tracing software going live for the very first time. And on the call yesterday with Apple and Google, they say that multiple U.S. states, 22 countries on 5 continents have expressed interest in using their contact tracing software, including Alabama and North Dakota. But Apple and Google say it's meant to augment the public health's contact tracing programs and not replace them. And yes, this comes with more privacy measures as well, because on the call, I was really surprised, and so was everybody else, that there will be no location tracking. Also, Bluetooth masking is also important as well. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle they have to get over.
Okay, you got that right. Susan, thank you very much indeed.
About 17.8% in the month of April, actually better than what the real estate market was anticipating, especially in these COVID times. But still, we're looking at one of the worst numbers that we've seen since 2010. Now, as for the actual number of home sales, 4.33 million was the annualized rate. Again, that's pretty much in line with what people were seeing in the market. And you might find this interesting because home prices, despite the fact that you have sales falling, went up. We're looking at an average home price for existing homes, which represent about 90% of the market, up 7% to $286,800. And the reason why that happens, and I've asked a lot of people, is because you have very low, record low mortgage rates, and there's still a little bit of supply, less supply in the market, so people have to still bid up for the homes that they can buy.
Okay, let's see.
Obviously, bright spots, and like a lot of other companies, the year actually started off pretty good in January, and then COVID-19 hit. So we had revenue down some 15% in those 3 months, but they used the term green shoots. Remember that? That was what we used during the European sovereign debt crisis a few years ago, and they say they have slight recovery, some green shoots in the month of May. So we know that Expedia has been down about 26% this year, being hit pretty hard, along with the rest of the travel industry, and so they've cashed up. They raised about $3 billion in cash to hopefully stem them over when people start traveling once again. But here's something for you that I found very interesting. You know, Soros's hedge fund, they sold out of pretty much everything in the first quarter into the second quarter. They sold out JPM, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley. You know what they bought into, which really surprised me? They bought into Bookings Holdings, which is a big online travel company. So there might be some recovery taking place at cheap prices.
Yeah, I mean,